Das Modelabel Boohoo wurde jetzt angeschuldigt, unter anderem der Sklaverei, wie es in Anführungszeichen hieß in verschiedenen Zeitungen. Unter anderem ging es darum, dass zum Beispiel Menschen unwürdig unter menschenunwürdigen Bedingungen arbeiten müssen, unter anderem deutlich weniger als den Mindestlohn erhalten und unter anderem eben auch nicht vor Covid-19 geschützt wurden mit der entsprechend notwendigen Ausrüstung. Was passiert, wenn die eigene Marke so etwas betrifft? Da haben wir uns einen Experten eingeladen, bekannt von BBC und Sky. Er war auch vorher bereits zweimal bei uns, von daher freuen wir uns, dass er sich wieder Zeit genommen hat. Alan Stevens aus London stand für ein Interview bereit. Das Interview wurde in englischer Sprache durchgeführt. Boo-hoo! And that's not me crying, but it might be the sound from the board of directors room at the moment in exactly that company. In July 2020, Boohoo has been accused of sourcing their garments from Leicester's manufacturers who pay less than minimum wage. Also, labor behind the label also accused of Boohoo to source garments from factories that did not protect staff from COVID-19, as well as general poor work conditions at their UK suppliers. Backed by popular demand, we have today here Alan Stevens, reputation expert. Hello and welcome back, Alan Stevens.
Thank you, Niels. It's a pleasure to be back.
So that must be your business, that someone calls you and says, look, this just happened.
It is, very much so. Well, I haven't had a call from Boohoo yet, but who knows after this has gone out. It's entirely possible. And yes, it's an utter disaster for them.
Yeah, so let's say I am a company, and of course, I mean, I most likely, let's say I am the CEO, I talk with you, and of course, I mean, when we look into the media, just today, so Boohoo share prices plunges by 26%. Then the Telegraph, Boohoo shares sink after Leicester factory revelations. Also the Telegraph, Boohoo faces exodus of social media influencers. The Guardian, the story of a £4 Boohoo dress, cheap clothes at a high cost. So how do I now get started to get something like that under control?
Well, obviously, you don't usually start from there. That's the thing. I'm usually working with companies before they get into that mess. But given the fact they are in a mess, the first thing I would do, I would give them the standard mantra that we give to companies in this sort of state or anybody who's suffering from a potential reputation damage, and that is tell it all, tell it early, and tell it yourself. It's classic crisis management. You need to come out, you need to uncover the facts, you need to be the source of information, and you need to make sure that nobody else steps into that space and starts accusing you of anything else.
So let's say I'm the CEO of Boohoo, and of course I have shareholders, and shareholders want to get out of this at the minimum cost. So when I would tell them, I'm going to tell it all, they will tell me, no, you won't.
Well, the thing is, if they want to come out of this at all, if they want to make sure that the company keeps going and keeps trading, and let alone the share price holds up, then you've got to come out and say what's going on. Boohoo want to retain their customers. They want to retain their shareholders. Therefore, the only thing they can do is to immediately issue a full investigation into what's happened.
Okay, so what happens if I don't know what really happened? Because let's face it, most likely the PR department or wherever they are, most likely these people are not on site in Leicester and they don't really know what happened.
Well, they need to go and find out. And this is where the head of a company, the managing director, the CEO, has to take over. If I was in their position, I'd be on the scene right now. I would be getting myself to Leicester. I'd be finding out what's going on. I'd be sending my lieutenants along to provide support and look into the investigation. I want to know who signed the contract. I want to know what the conditions were. And I would come out and say that if people have been paid less than half the minimum wage, which is the accusation, they will no longer do business with them.
So, of course, people sometimes fear that because they say, well, I step to the press. So I step up. I say it all. Then people might show the reaction and say, well, you have to leave and you have to step down as the CEO or general manager or whatever your position is. They might call you out on leaving the company immediately.
That is entirely possible. That can happen, and it does happen. And there you've got to make the call, should you have known? I mean, if you're the head of a company, should you know what the conditions that your workers are required to work in are like? And if you don't know, I mean, you can either say they were ignorant of it, in which case they were derelict in their duty, or they knew what was going on and they allowed it to happen, in which case that's even worse. So they're in a cleft stick. They're in a very difficult situation. But yes, you're absolutely right. At some point, the CEO, the MD, has to take responsibility and may have to resign.
So let's say I'm the managing director and I hire you as a coach. And I say, I of course prefer to keep my job. And of course I will say, I can by no means, a company of that size, I can never know what happens in some factory hall, which is outsourced to the outsourced supplier somewhere at the end of it. It's impossible for me to control that.
Yeah.
So what should I say?
What you do then, I said you issue an immediate investigation. You find out exactly what's gone on. You find out how it's occurred. You take every possible step to make sure that it cannot possibly occur again. And then what you do is you perform an act of goodwill. Subsequently, an act of goodwill to whatever it is. You pay bonuses to all the people. You provide something to a charity. You do something which shows that not only have you learned from your experience, but someone else has benefited from your poor behavior.
So let's say the worst case happens and for one reason or the other, I have to step down. Maybe you remember that there was a scandal with Zurich Insurances. They had a case of a CFO committing suicide. Right. And one of the people stepping down said, I will leave the company because I think that is what society expects from me right now. Mm-hmm. Let's say that is not the best statement, I assume.
No, no, it's not. That's not the best thing to say. But what you would say is, I will take responsibility, or I should have known, or I should have been looking more closely at that. You need to have a certain amount of self-awareness. You need to say, if I have been to blame, if I have not been doing my duty diligently, then I will take the consequences. I mean, let's face it, people are paid a lot of money to look after these organizations. They're paid a lot of money to take these responsibilities on. It is their role to know how the company is run. It is their role to make sure things are happening responsibly.
So how do I make this statement? Because when I say I should have known, there's of course always the likelihood of a legal investigation and a possible punishment afterwards. So I don't want to give a guilty statement to the press immediately.
No, you don't. But what you can do, you can express your sorry. You can apologize for what's happened. Apologizing doesn't mean you're taking the blame. What it means is you're sorry that happened. And you feel badly for the workers. You feel badly for the customers of the organization. You feel badly for the shareholders because they will all have suffered as a result of this. So an apology is not an admission of guilt. And I think an apology is nearly always appropriate. If you come out with your hands up and say, it's all my fault, well, then you take whatever consequences result.
Excellent. So would you say that there are situations where even you with your experience would say that's a situation you cannot win?
Yes. And I've certainly advised people in those situations where I've said to people, you have no option. You have no option but to resign. And what we'll do is we'll work on the resignation statement. And certainly that's what I've done. There are some circumstances where you've placed yourself quite often in such an untenable situation that you cannot possibly recover. The thing is, if people make a dreadful mistake, they will always be remembered for it. And that company will suffer. And you owe it to the shareholders, you owe it to the rest of the staff to just step aside and let somebody else take over.
And the final question, with your experience as a reputation expert, and this is of course most likely a life-changing situation for many, when you do one of these mistakes, but when you have to step down, do you think that a reputation, when you've been, let's say you were managing director of a large company, will your reputation ever recover by time or by specific steps or means?
Oh yeah, absolutely. There are many, many examples of reputations being recovered. It can take a long time. You know, there's an old adage that it can take, 20 years to build a reputation and 10 seconds to ruin it, and then another 20 years to build it up again. And that's probably true. What you can do, like former politicians, you can throw yourself into charity work. What you can do, like Gerald Ratner, who made an awful comment that resulted in all of his jewelry shops being sold, you can go into the professional speaking world, funnily enough, eventually, and talk about your own experiences. There are things that you can do. The one thing that you can probably never do is to go back to the business you were in before. Because people have lost trust in what you did, and therefore a change of career is inevitable.
Excellent. So if you would now say the next 3 steps Boohoo should take right now, what will be your advice? Okay,
I think the first thing they should do is to say how sorry they feel for any hurt or damage or distress that's been caused to anybody, regardless of how they're involved. So an apology is the first thing to do. The second thing is an investigation to find out exactly what happened, to find out if these people really were suppliers of theirs. There's some doubt as to whether that was the case or not. And if they were, to show the steps that they're going to take to make sure that this issue is dealt with and that these circumstances never occur again. But it's not an easy path to tread, I've got to tell you. It's difficult. The only thing that will save them, and this is a slightly cynical approach, is the fact that their clothes are so cheap and so widely available that people may simply overlook the fact that they're produced in dreadful conditions.
Excellent advice. So, of course, I'm going to put your contact data in the show notes of this podcast so people get in contact with you directly if they have a couple of questions or when they just want to hire you as their consultant, because maybe some companies now are in a similar situation.
I wouldn't be in the least surprised. I keep myself fairly busy, Niels, as you know well.
Yeah, I can imagine. So at the end of this interview, there's only one thing for me left to say. Alan, thank you very much for your time.
Great pleasure, Niels. Thank you very much indeed.